Thank you very much, panelists, for agreeing to join us here today. I think Yogesh kind of set the stage for what we want to discuss over the next 45 minutes. And I think we've got an amazing panel together from that perspective. We've got representatives of the large companies, but we've also got smaller companies and startup kind of ecosystems represented on the panel. So we should get a fairly healthy perspective of where these challenges are going. So I'd just like to kickstart this debate first based on this data that we have seen. These are obviously averages, and a lot of massaging of the data is being done. But from your personal opinions, how reflective is this of the data talent challenges that you're facing? Go ahead.
So, okay, so let me take a shot at that first. So, I think it's definitely representative of the industry in terms of the talent shortage. What I would say is analysts are difficult to hire and even more difficult to keep, right? So, it's definitely a challenge when it comes to hiring for GICs, especially like ours, GIC of a Fortune 40 company. So, definitely there's a talent shortage. We're seeing that even in terms of our recruitment, in terms of the amount of time taken to hire people. So, yeah, definitely I would say that's definitely a number that we would believe.
He's a different perspective on this, yes.
Yeah, so when it comes to the talent shortage part, that can be taken into two sides. One is when we are looking at futuristic roles that is coming up with respect to data science, which can be like data linguist or data artist, and also we are looking at somebody called a data librarian. So these are futuristic roles that's coming up because with more and more people working with text, so the data science on the text is quite different from what we have on data. So data linguist is somebody who can interpret that text analytics and can communicate that business value to the business. So that is quite a big of a challenge, and that's going to come up rapidly in next 2 to 3 years with respect to data linguistic role. The next one is a data librarian with data lakes that is being built by governments and private bodies. So there has to be somebody who is knowledgeable about data and keep a track of what are the different data that is coming into. So the role of data librarian is also something coming up. The third and the last one is, I think, just like what Excel did to the business leaders with black box and no-code data science platforms that is also coming up. I think more and more business leaders will start getting into creating data science on their own rather than depending on data scientists because of no-code data platforms that is also emerging.
So what are the other kinds of new roles that you see coming up, right? He's thrown in a couple of them and there's shortages there, but...
Yeah, I'll take that question. See, I think in the earlier, when the speaker was talking, there was a question about, business and, the domain knowledge and the data scientists, etc. So what I see is that, I think somebody there, had that question. So the kind of new roles that are emerging are, we keep hearing that, we need a data scientist kind of a thing, but that is not the only roles that are needed. What we see is that there is a need for people who understand the function or the domain, let's say be it retail or financial services, who understand that particular domain and who has a good appreciation of analytics and AI and how this can be applied to that particular business or the function. So that is one of the key skills is needed, and then we see that a lot of people with functional skills or the domain skills, getting an understanding. They need not be, like a data scientist who can go and implement the algorithms, etc. But they need to know what kind of techniques can be used and how it can be applied in that domain. So that is one of the trend that we see. And in fact, in our company, we have these people drive the analytics and the AI because, end of the day, any insight or any analytics that you do, it is going to be consumed by the business. It is the people, some of them, they call it, this is a bridge skill, or people who are, translators to the, between the data science and the business. So that is one skill that is needed. The other thing, when Yogesh was talking about, he was talking about, big data, visualization, analytics and AI, separately they were talking about. But I see that, any problem that you are solving doesn't come with a saying that, I need to use a AI technique or, deep learning technique or a regular, regression technique or, those kind of things. So problem when you are getting into, you will see as you try to solve which algorithm to use. So there is a, need for cross-skilling for the probably data science folks who are using the traditional techniques to the latest deep learning techniques, etc. There's an overlap in that, and also when we see what kind of demand that is coming in the market is that I want a person who are understanding the data science, plus who has some understanding of the big data, and also who knows the retail domain or the financial services, the risk kind of a domain. So these are the kind of skills that are emerging. So there is a domain person, and also the data scientist plus an understanding of the domain is also needed. The other thing is that, earlier speaker was also saying that the data scientists were sitting in the business. They were just taking the data from the IT and then providing the insight, and then that's all. Business was using it for decision making. But it is, changing. So the data science, whatever the insights that they provide, it is getting embedded into the business process, be it supply chain or on the order processing side, etc. These are getting embedded into that. So which means that the people who are implementing the large systems, be it SAP or custom-made systems, etc., need to see how these analytics need to be embedded in that. So there is a skill needed for somebody, program managers or project managers who understand not just SAP or the application development, but also some appreciation for the data science. So that is another skill that is needed there and all. So I'll stop here, and maybe if somebody else has any additional.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting what you say, because we see a lot of demand for AI, ML talent, people who know the techniques, people who know how to code, people who know how to develop solutions, but I think these bridge roles are super critical. And I think when I look at the two bridges, there's a vertical bridge, which is kind of a more generational gap, isn't there? There are people who've been in the industry 20 years, who've seen the economic cycles, who've seen how things work and how risk is managed, versus people who are completely new, who are coding. So there needs to be a bridge, because both these skills are valuable. The skill of having the knowledge of the industry, deep knowledge of economic cycles, is very valuable. And the skill of coding and developing a solution is extremely valuable. So we need somebody who's playing that bridge. Also, another thing we realize, as technology has evolved, and as we are talking about data lakes and data engineering, and so it's becoming more and more difficult to deploy an optimal solution without kind of 5 different skills participating in it. And what that does is, not one person will have the 5 skills. So you need a bridge there as well. So you need a horizontal bridge of sorts, saying that you develop a solution, but unless you can deploy it in a manner that's optimal for execution and for customer benefit, it's useless. So I'm realizing a lot of roles which are either the vertical bridge between generation or horizontal bridge between capabilities are becoming equally valuable, and they are very, very hard to find.
Just a small note to close. I think my fellow panelists have covered the future asks quite well. Something that Seshu referred to in what he spoke, a lot of data science work is essentially triggered by business. Right, so some aspect of business will ask or will be in need of a data science driven solution. And therefore the need for business managers, whether they're analysts or middle managers, senior managers, to have a sufficient appreciation, understanding of data science and what and where it can be applied to solve for their problems, whether one calls it emerging roles or skills or whatever, that is extremely critical, right? Because given that the trigger is from business, unless business managers are well aware of what's possible, they will not be able to appropriately brief, or in fact, in the example that the previous speaker was giving, went and hired a bunch of people without really knowing why they wanted to bring them on board, right? So business managers knowing data science or having sufficient appreciation is extremely critical.
Thank you. So let me throw googly at the panel right now, right? So I mean, all of us have heard of Bombay duck. And a Bombay duck is neither from Bombay nor is it made of duck. It's just a dish. The question to you is all of you have been speaking about this being multidisciplinary and a lot of variety of experiences coming together. If you were to go back a few years and restart, would you want to give this role a different name today? Don't call them data scientists. Tough one.
No, it was called statisticians, but I think they changed to data scientists, become more...
Because, I mean, a lot of the confusion seems to arise that I'm a data scientist, therefore I belong to the CIO department. Whereas if you were called a business intelligence engineer or something, is it more in line with the kind of work that a guy does? I don't know.
No, I think from the business side, I think some of the companies are already called decision scientists, etc.
Yeah.
And all. I think that is there, but I think it will still change, is what I feel. You know,
Okay.
maybe
So
something else.
it will
Maybe
evolve.
AI specialist is what they'll call
Yeah.
me. You know.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah. So one of the earliest examples of when a data scientist was actually hired was initially in Facebook in 2004, 2005.
A little louder.
In 2004, 2005, where Facebook hired their first data scientist. The role was to actually hire somebody in PhD who has worked with a lot of data. Without any choice, they had to learn software programming as well. And because they are dealing with so much data, they had to learn statistics as well. So that was the kind of candidates Facebook was looking at. And the best definition they coined was a data scientist is somebody who is a better statistician than an average software developer, and he's a better software developer than an average statistician. So that's the definition of a data scientist. I think over the years, we have added on that they need to understand business as well, and they need to understand machine learning and all the new techniques that is coming up. If the best terminology, or if you think about what is the kind of work the data scientists do, I would rebrand it as data janitors, because that's what most of the time the data scientists do. That is the majority of the work. 10% is the cool stuff that comes out of the 90% of the hard work that goes in. And people generally from outside sees the 10% of the coolness and not the 90% of the cleaning work that goes into the data. If you enjoy cleaning that, it's a beautiful Zen zone to be. If you enjoy cleaning the data, prepping the data to actually build something cool. So.
Thank you. A refreshing insight. Thank you. So this is tough enough, right? This is not easy to. So where are you getting these people from? How many of them are like? I mean, we got a huge gap. We have seen that gap, and that gap is likely to grow. How are we going to staff this as an industry?
You know, so of course there are fresher level roles. Data science, of course, the roles have existed in the past, but now with technology and cloud computing driving, the migration of data and the digitization of data, the demand is much higher. Having said that, the bulk of the demand is still at low to mid levels, I would imagine, than at senior levels just yet. So freshers do, people who are sort of just out of institutes across the country, they do tend to form a significant part of the supply. I think the challenge there, basically, these are themes that we've all touched upon already, is it's not enough to know the statistics. It's not just enough to know some algorithm. Understanding business context is everything. The programming, actually, I would put that as the third skill. Necessary, important, but maybe someone else can help you with it. Yeah. But not having business or domain knowledge experience, the best data scientists that I have interacted with are people who can function as business managers in that domain equally well, right? And without having that, you're basically sitting with a toolbox without knowing, which screw to where to kind of turn, right? There is this sort of famous story about this ship breaking down, and then, I don't know if I'll tell it right, but, and they couldn't fix it. They couldn't figure out how to get the ship to float right or whatever, and then some consultants came down, not from my company, but they sort of presented a huge bill of materials. They did a lot of poking around everything, and then still it didn't work. And then an old man, came by, and all he had was, I think, one spanner, and he spent 3 days doing nothing, and then he just turned a couple of screws and it worked, and he presented a bigger bill. And they said, but that's all you did. He said, no, it's that data janitor thing. He knew where to turn the screws, right? So the tools are important, but having business context is probably more critical.
Yeah, I think just in terms of demand and supply, I think that there is no option but to increase the proportion of freshers in your hiring. I think we just do not have enough folks with the skill set available in the market. So that has happened naturally. I think in the last 2 years, I'd say campus hiring for data science roles probably increased to 20-25% of overall need. And so that's a fairly significant number. The second option we rely on is obviously reskilling our folks, training them into new skills and getting them to the new world. But that's also hard because we are still running in the old world, and preparing them for the new world at the same time sometimes causes disruptions. But I think as all of us would have seen, lateral hiring is a jungle, isn't it? You're basically hiring, losing, and it goes on for every 2-3 years. So my best bet is hire freshers, train them, give them the domain knowledge, and really see if they grow into leaders of the organizations. And so
Okay, so let me add a GIC perspective to all of this, right? So we are a GIC of a Fortune 40 company. Given the fact that we are a GIC, we have twin challenges of managing both cost as well as capability. So how do we manage cost? We manage cost through hiring a significant number of freshers, but we've also got to show the capability because, these are companies based out of the US, they have access to talent probably on the West Coast, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got to continuously show capability also, and also display the fact that we've got the right talent coming in from a variety of companies that's there in Bangalore, right? So I'd say probably 60 to 70% freshers and probably 30-40% laterals is how we typically manage it. I'd like to slightly disagree on a point in terms of freshers where you said that domain context. Absolutely, domain context is very, very necessary for solving any kind of data challenges. But if you look at the report that NASSCOM and Niti Aayog has brought out, they have said a bulk of the roles in analytics is going to continue to be at a data analyst level, right? I know a lot of companies call them data scientists because they can't hire them otherwise. But the reality is a bulk of the roles are going to be data analyst roles, right? And for those data analyst roles, we'd prefer hiring freshers simply because we can train them the way we want them to be rather than them carrying the baggage of another company coming in and stuff. So.
And I think that speaks to his point about, they are the data janitors, so to say, right? So they are curating the data, and therefore maybe domain is less important than the technical skills. But then let me ask you a related question. If a bulk of the demand, for whatever reason, is going to be met by freshers, who are these freshers? I mean, are we still talking about engineering grads? Are we going to the world of BSc statistics? Where are these people coming from?
I think if you asked me 3 years back, we were focusing on hiring people with primarily math, economics, kind of skills that we were hiring. But with AI, what we see is that we need people with good understanding of math, plus also they need to have the programming skills. But when it comes to AI, if you want to solve the problems in NLP, computer vision, etc., they are programming intensive. People need to understand and coding skills plus also algorithms there. But whereas people with math and stat and economics, they will have math part of it, but they need to be trained on the programming skills part of it, SQL and things like that. So it is now both. So what we do is we take people with math kind of backgrounds and also MBA in, with minor in analytics. We train them into the SQLs and some of the, maybe make them industry ready by training them on common technology, common things and all. Let's say maybe some big data skill also, they will do that. For the people with comp science background, undergrads, we take them and then they would know the programming, Python and other skills that they would know. They would also understand algorithms. We will teach them on the data science part of it. So that's how we are trying to do that at this point in time.
There's a large...
It is similar to what Seshu talked about. So it's people with, or places where people come out with good understanding of math, statistics, economics, econometrics, and at the junior level, it's actually very important for them to be able to handle and manage the data themselves, right? So, whether it is R, Python, or SQL, or the programming skills necessary to extract, manage, and model the data themselves, not just know the statistical tools. So it's a combination of that. It's not so much engineering kind of grads. I mean, they go into slightly different roles.
Good, thank you. Before I come to how we fill out this, what about laterals? I know that it is a lesser of a population, but are there challenges? And if so, what kinds of challenges are we talking about? Where do you think the maximum hiring? Is it 5 to 15 or 0 to 5?
Yeah, so let me talk about the challenges of hiring laterals first. So number one challenge is we've got a lot of online programs that are available, and credit to them, they do a good job of sort of teaching you the theory or whatever it is. The challenge is the practical implementation, right? So there are very few courses out there at the moment that actually offer you a practical hands-on experience to problems that a particular company is facing, right? So that's number one. Number two is there's a lack of infrastructure for these guys to actually do stuff, right? So a lot of companies that I've worked for anyway don't necessarily give them access to data, especially if it's customer sensitive information. So they're probably working with dummy data, which probably doesn't address the size and scale of what we need from an analytics perspective. The third thing, and I think the most important thing for actually making laterals successful, is a mentorship program. So if you have a great online program that they go on to and they get the theory right, you've got to have some level of mentorship from the data science team or the analytics team in-house for them to actually understand what is needed. And that's the challenge, because not a lot of people will have the time to actually train them on these skills. So that's the challenge, really. The final bit I want to talk about on the lateral side is that typically, if let's say you're in IT, you get the itch to move into analytics probably 5-6 years into your career, right? Now, once you've done 6 years of IT, I think there are two challenges. One is the fact that you think that everything is about programming. I might be wrong, but at least a lot of cases that I've seen. The second part of it is you're not willing to start fresh, right? Whereas if I'm hiring for talent laterally, I'd like them to start at least a level junior than what they are, which most people are not willing to do. So that's another challenge we faced with laterals.
Anybody else?
Laterals, data science as accurately defined, not in the broader sense that where data analysts are being called data scientists. I think in data science, the supply at a lateral, within laterals is limited. And by laterals, I mean sort of 6+, 7+ years, not 2-3 years into their career. And essentially, when you hire a lateral into a data science heavy role, you're actually hiring for business knowledge, domain knowledge. You're not actually hiring them for their algorithmic skills. I mean, you expect that, but what you're really hiring them for is serious experience in a specific domain, or maybe in our context, specific clients and so on. Right. So what you want that person to come in and do is be able to start working on client and business problems very quickly and be able to translate them for the doers in the data science team. But the supply is actually limited.
Yeah, I think if you look at lateral hiring, most of the lateral hiring still happens in, let's say, 0 to 3 year experience window, isn't it? So you're basically saying you can't find enough freshers, so let me supplement people who joined in the last 2 years in the workforce, and let's start hiring them. And that's where bulk of lateral hiring happens, which I believe is no different from campus hiring. You have to train them, you have to bring them the domain knowledge. They bring with themselves obviously the trained skill set, so they're probably a notch above campus hires. But I think the real challenge we have, as people have mentioned, is getting to a place where you need to hire somebody who is 6-10 years of experience, and getting them to come in and kind of get integrated with your organization. Because one of the challenges we face, and I'll talk about just my organization, is when you start hiring and say, I need somebody with 10 years of experience, I don't need somebody who comes in as kind of a data science expert. I need somebody who can come integrate into my business problems and become a risk manager. a risk manager who knows how to leverage data science is what I'm looking for. And I think by having a lot of discussions and a lot of surveys of this nature which says you need to be a data scientist to be in demand, people are starting to become data science experts. And I think to me that's a problem. At some point, you cannot get senior by just being a skill set expert. You need to become a business expert. You need to become an owner of a business. And if you don't change your positioning at a certain point of time, I think then that skill is unemployable. Then it's very difficult for us to hire senior people at that level.
So that's a nice segue into my next question. So we're talking about freshers, we have challenges there, we're talking about the laterals, less than 10 years, we have challenges there. So what do you think companies, the academia, and the training institutes should do to kind of take this forward? We are going to see a huge gap. How do we make that happen?
I think one of the key gaps we have is just evolution of capabilities and having kind of a consistent understanding of how capabilities evolve as you grow senior in your careers. And I think academia obviously can influence that a lot. They can train people the right manner. Institutes like yourselves or even industry bodies can come up with the capability frameworks that are more consistent and deployable at scale. Because right now I think I see a ton of inconsistency. Anybody you talk to has a slightly different framework. I think they're broadly in agreement, but everybody is trying to do something different. And we are very skill set focused and very technique focused and very kind of platform focused, and I think beyond a point all that does not help, isn't it? So I think if everybody could get together, and I think industry, academia, training institutes and industry bodies getting together and coming up with a capability evolution matrix, I think is step number one, and then I think we can go from there to kind of to bridge the demand supply gap in a manner where the training will meet the demands of the business. And today I think it partially meets the demand. It's not all over, it's not all encompassing.
So, I mean, at the outset, I should say I'm not super familiar with a lot of curriculum, details, in the data science programs, not only at your institute, but also at others. But what would be great is if, data science would be taught the way actually business management is taught, which is very case, example, utilization of the knowledge kind of approach, right? A lot of the students who come into these data science programs, they like we said, they come in from maths, stats, economics background, which are very academic subjects. Of course, they have real world applications, but they aren't at that stage in their lives. So, teaching data science, for example, when I think a lot of people would be familiar with this legendary story of, of the beer and Pampers case study of P&G, right? At Walmart many years back, about 45, 50 years back, P&G picked up this fact that weekends, there used to be, higher offtake of Pampers. And they wondered why that was, and then they went and observed, and they found that people were driving out for the weekend, and basically the fathers were going in to pick up beer, and they would also pick up Pampers for the children. And they actually then, redefined store merchandise to ensure beer and Pampers were actually next to each other and actually grew their sales. So that's data science at work, right? Right? The data science by observation. So we need like modern day legendary stories to be told in these classes.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think he's right. A problem doesn't come with a saying that, you need to apply, KNN or logistic regression. It doesn't come with the definition. Case study based approach is one of the key things. In fact, for the people that we train in our campus, we teach the theory part of it and then give them a case study with the data and then ask them to apply what they have learned, and we'll see how they can learn. In fact, our selection process for the freshers also in this approach, we take this approach, especially when we are hiring people with math and econ and those kind of backgrounds, we do that. The other thing I wanted to add is probably you are talking about the reskilling of the people that internally, how we are going to do it. One of the I have taken some people from, rest of the business who have come from application development or package implementation. And like you said, you need to let go of some of the baggage from that. This is a different paradigm in which you work. It is not about programming part of it. And I see that, some of them who have come to my team and then they've, learned along the way, and they've been very successful in, like I said earlier, it is the execution part of it is very important. The entire life cycle of the project. It is not about only the applying the, building the algorithm part, but there is a lot of things before and after that is there. So these people, because they worked in, application development in a particular domain, etc., they would have picked up the understanding of that, and so that is one skill that they bring in. They also learn this, and hence they've been successful. I feel that, reskilling is going to be within organizations like ours. We will reskill people who are interested, because we see that a lot of them are going and learning from institute like you and others, and then picking up the skills. So they will be, under the right mentorship in analytics, they will be able to scale up and reach that gap.
So just from a time perspective, last googly from my side, if you will. We saw when the IT industry took off on the S-curve. There too we had a huge, lot of discussions around talent shortage out to me. Do you think this is a bigger problem than that? Because we now have a baggage? The S-curve on the data science area?
See, I think what I see is that there's going to be, integration of data science or the AI into the rest of the businesses, and hence, anything, be it any package or custom development, etc. This skill need to get embedded into whatever you are doing. It gets into the business processes. So BPO work will need this. Any package that you are implementing will get into So I think, there has to be, one side you need to have the data science skills need to be there, and then from the IT side of the skills, they need to learn this and then embed these things into. That's how I see that, but gap is definitely there, because if you don't understand and implement, you can throw, data, an algorithm at the data, it will give some insight, whether it makes sense or not is there, but that you need to be in.
Currently, we see that there is a talent shortage, but we interact with many institutions. We take lectures there in order to close that gap, whatever we can do. And I should say the training institutes are actually doing a phenomenal job. Everybody is trying to figure out, that is one thing, but I think training institutions, internal learning, L&D departments are doing a good job to actually reskill and upskill and introduce new people into this field. And what Rahul was saying is, what training institutes has to do is get people excited about by telling good data stories and legendary data science outcomes, and self-learning and impact of self-learning in them, because what we see is freshers are the people who pick up the latest algorithms in data science, and they are doing that because they see that there are new problems to be solved. And in the future, just like the IT industry faced, I think we will be facing a talent shortage, because every industry over the next 5 to 6 years is going to become a software industry, essentially. Everybody is going to be a data company. Everybody will be collecting data. So data talent is going to be in shortage, but different kinds of automation that's coming up might fill the gap a little bit. But I think we will still be, there's a long way to go before we close the the talent gap in this field.
Anybody else share a thought?
So very quickly, right? I think the industry, probably, I think one of the ideas that I have, the industry should be more open to sharing data, right? And the reason I say that is because I've worked in 2 large retail corporations. I'd probably stick my neck out and say 80% of the problems from an analytics point of view is exactly the same, right? There's probably slightly a context difference, but I think 80% of the problems that we're trying to solve are pretty much the same if you look at a particular industry, right? So if you're talking of people acquiring the right skill sets and getting the right exposure, there's got to be an incentive for companies to share some of this data, right? Now, the incentive could be that you have first access to the talent, etc., but there's got to be an incentive. The other part is I don't see enough of an industry academia partnership on this, right? So we go out and hire probably 60% of the product, but we don't necessarily invest a lot of time in, working with academia, for example, to develop the curriculum, and that's I think a big need anyway.
So we got like 10 seconds as we speak. Is there any question that, yes sir, already, that was fast.
There's one question here, so
Yeah,
can we
okay.
just take that and then the
Okay,
rest?
there's one there also, and that last two.
Yeah, hi, my name is Abhishek, and clearly we can see that the entire discussion has been centering around defining the roles of a data scientist. Now, do you think, because when we talk data, so business is sacrosanct to data, and there is where I feel the gap is. So do you feel that there is a need to rebrand the entire data scientist portfolio, probably have an AI analyst and separately for business?
Maybe in the short term, but I think eventually everything needs to be integrated, isn't it? It's just, I don't see a long-run model where AI and data scientists and machine learning are kind of separate skills. And somebody told me all this will ultimately become like electricity. It's a part of life, isn't it? It's not going, so hopefully we won't have separate analytics teams and separate data sciences teams. You will have product teams, you will have risk teams, you will have marketing teams, and analytics, data science, machine learning, everything is embedded in that, isn't it? It's a part of life. So I think so today, you're right. I think today we need to differentiate on skill sets because those skill sets are just not available. But eventually, I don't see that as a long-run outcome.
Yeah, I just want to add, like one of the things everybody is looking at is, I want to improve my customer experience. Is it digital problem? No, it is not just the digital side of the problem, but there is a lot of data that gets generated there and then which need to be probably looked at and then analyzed and then improve what channel to, divert them to. So it is digital plus data plus analytics plus maybe something else also needed there. So I think it is going to be, subsumed under, like you said, in every part of the business there. So I don't think, yeah, he's right. Maybe 5 years down the line, there'll not be a separate analytics team alone or the AI team in the companies, yeah.
Last question.
Hello all, I am Priyesh from Politics. I am from economics background myself, but I find that there is a discussion between the composition of freshers and laterals in the industry and the demand for it. But what would you advise a fresher in a non-technical background who wants to build a career in data analytics? And I see a bias towards hiring from freshers from tier 1 and tier 2 institutes. If a person is not coming from that institute, so what would you advise a non-technical background if he wants to make a career in data analytics or data science?
So for freshers or for laterals, I don't think there's a bias towards institutions. If you can actually take up a data problem and show some kind of value out of it or a story out of it and pitch that to the companies are actually looking for self-learners like that because internally they have not, if we have to upskill somebody, first of all, somebody internally has to have that skill, but the field is moving so fast. If you have figured out the latest algorithm and you can say that I've actually found a data solution with this data and that can be used in your business context. If you can pitch that story to the companies, I don't think the institutions or your background itself, they will not look into. It's about whether you are actually somebody who can self-learn on this. And that is the way to go. And there's even if existing data scientists also has to do the same thing because their skills are going to be relevant in the next 2 to 3 years with new algorithms coming in.
I just want to add that if you really see it now, many companies are using hackathons as a way of hiring. So, there it doesn't matter which institute you come from, as long as you can prove that as part of the hackathon that you are able to solve a problem using techniques as well as programming. So I think that is kind of getting addressed. We are trying to adapt, we are starting up some pilots to hire people using hackathon as a way to do that.
All right, I think we have to call it a day here for us. Fortunately, the timer just stops at 0, so it doesn't go below that, so we don't know how much overrun we have. But first of all, thank you very much to the panelists. But from our perspective as academia, we have a huge challenge because when many of the seniors here, when we did our graduation, post-graduation, our faculty members knew what kind of jobs we were going to get into, and they trained us suitably. today, I as a faculty, I'm not clear what kind of job my students are going to get 2 years, 3 years from now. And study after study indicates that, thousands of new kinds of jobs will evolve over the next few years. And the best that we can do is meet the ones that are going to happen in the next year, year and a half. So this is one thing that we're going to see. The other big thing is that as an industry, we need to really create a new culture. So change the culture that we have, because the IT industry created a culture from scratch, but now we are trying to build on top of that culture when we talk about data science. And that's a challenge that all of them have been speaking about. I mean, he's just said, hey, will you be willing to take a position one step lower? And what is the social stigma associated with that? There are other issues that we need to resolve as we go along. And I think the last piece of the puzzle, which, the last question raised, how important is a certification or a degree in this? Should we change the rules of the game there and say, if you have the competence, please join us, that kind of thing. It promises to be an interesting future, right? The world as we know it is going to change, has started to change, is going to change far more dramatically. And I think listening to the panelists, it's a huge challenge. I mean, I think we should be privileged to be working in this kind of a time frame now. We have an exciting period ahead, and we have the opportunity to make history. Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your support. Thanks for sharing your ideas. Folks, thank you.